Can you hear me all clearly?
Hey guys, welcome to this week's podcast episode. I'm really excited about today's guest, Dr. Agam Dhawan. He is a board certified psychiatrist and he helps young men and gamers take back their mental health. Today's going to be talking about all about his journey, leveling up in life, mental health crisis, gamers as well. And you'll see how all of this fits in. Every time I have a chance to interview a physician on this show, I always take that chance and for the audience and listeners, and I'm really excited about the episode. So, Agam, welcome.
Perfect. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So, kind of talk about your story and your influences, and we'll dive right into the conversation.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that sounds like a plan.
Kind of talk about your journey and how you got to be doing what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. So I currently work with gamers and young men to help them level up, right, in real life and to improve their mental health. And the way that I first got started with this was I remember when I was in high school, I had this daily routine every day. So it was coming home, grabbing a plate of Oreo cookies, not just one or two, an entire plate, taking this plate downstairs to my basement, shutting off all the lights, making sure the blinds were closed, my
Hmm.
parents were out of the home, and just gaming. Literally from, let's say, 3 p.m. till 8, 9, 10, 11. Maybe taking a break for dinner, but that's about it. And so I remember doing this and my mental health started deteriorating a little bit, started feeling a little bit more down. I wasn't getting the sleep that I wanted. It was really hard for me to concentrate. And I remember this moment very vividly where there was this girl in high school who I wanted to ask out to prom, but I was too anxious, too shy to do it.
Yeah.
And then some other guy asked her out. And so I remember going to prom by myself, wearing an oversized suit with a tie I just learned how to tie 2 hours prior, sitting there and watching this girl that I liked dance with this other guy because he was brave enough to ask her and I wasn't. And so I just remember like everything crystallizing in that moment, all those feelings, those negative thoughts I had about myself, all the lonely nights that I was having, everything in that moment, I remember feeling all of it. And so when I went to college, I decided, okay, I can't keep doing this, that things have got to change, or else I'm going to be stuck living this way for the rest of my life. And so slowly started getting into uh, fitness and social skills and stepping a little bit back from gaming, learning about dating, learning about relationships, all that stuff, that journey that like every young guy goes through. And then so when I went to med school, I was trying to decide which specialty I wanted to do. And really, like, I think the choice was pretty clear because this was the only specialty that psychiatry where I felt like I could make a difference because I felt like I had lived that life.
Mhm.
And so now, kind of going through that journey, I decided that I want to focus my career and my life to helping out other young guys because I feel like that's a population that really doesn't know how to seek out help, when to seek help, and what to even do when they find it. And so I felt like I could really be that bridge, that gap for a lot of these young guys.
Yeah, and it's quite interesting because you have a really interesting story and a lot of topics to unravel. So one thing talking about, gamers, and you kind of allude to feeling like a loser. Is it just gamers or is it just kind of shy, awkward individuals, nerds? The what is the common thread?
Yeah. So I think that the common thread is a young man feeling lost in today's world. So as a young guy, right, what you're expected to do is we're expected to perform. We can't sit in our mom's basements and game all the time because then we don't get any rewards in life if we do that. We don't get financially successful. We don't get romantically successful. We don't get any kind of career success, any respect, things that are really important to young guys. And of course, if all those things are lacking, then mental health is obviously going to follow for a lot of us. And so I identified with gamers because that's where I came from and that's how I identified. But really, any young guy who's struggling with their mental health really speaks to me, and I feel like can really have a good impact with that population.
Yeah, and it's quite interesting because I had a another podcast guest, and he was talking about this problem of masculinity, and there's no good role models, and kind of the stuff that is on the media and TV is really he calls it toxic. And then so, delving into this idea of relationships, you alluded to that, and you talk about why has finding love gotten harder for young men, and you talked about going down this rabbit hole, kind of elucidate that area.
Yeah, absolutely. So I agree that dating has definitely gotten harder, right? So as we think about how generations have shifted, before, let's say in the 1950s, there was, if there's 10 guys and 10 women, maybe eight or so of those guys would pair off with eight or so of those women, right? But now what's happening is that we have social media and we have online dating. So with that, you're the average woman, right? Instead of having access to those 10 guys, now she has access to hundreds, thousands, 10,000s of guys all around the world, around the campus, around the city, people that they would never have crossed paths otherwise. So now, right, as in dating, a young woman has all the leverage because she has all the options. The guys are pursuing her. So I don't know if you've had a chance to ever like look at a woman's DMs or Tinder messages and things, but they get flooded hundreds of messages. And that's no exaggeration, hundreds, thousands, right? And so of course, like as any person would, they want to pick the best that they can get. So for the average young guy, they're left in the dust because they're not getting chosen. I remember feeling this when I was young. And this was before social media that I wasn't getting chosen. It was the football guys who were getting chosen, or it was like the super fraternity stars who were getting chosen. It was the taller guys who were getting chosen. It was the more Caucasian guys. It wasn't me. And it sounds like you can relate to this a little bit too. And
Yeah.
so I think that's only gotten harder. And that's why I really try to push this message that in this world, right, we are evolutionary creatures. It's survival of the fittest. If we aren't deemed fit enough to reproduce, then our genes will not get passed on. So that's why we have no choice as guys but to level up, to improve everything in our lives, our fitness, our social skills, our mental health, our career, our finances, our charisma, all of that. Because then otherwise, we're not going to be able to do what life wants us to do, which is reproduce, have a family, and then pass on our genes.
So this idea, which you described, was the athletes or the white male, the tall male, the attractive ones, and then what you're alluding or kind of hinting is like the minorities or the people that don't fit into this are at a disadvantage, if that's a fair statement.
So there was a OK Cupid study one time, and it showed that comparing a Caucasian male to an Asian male of the same attractiveness, the Asian male had to make over $250,000 more than the Caucasian male to receive the same amount of attention in that online dating profile, right? So already we know that the media is skewed very Caucasian. We know that there's Eurocentric Caucasian standards, right? We know that Hollywood is very Caucasian leaning, and so that influences the beauty standards that people have in society, right? And so we can already start seeing a shift of that, where now we look at K-pop. K-pop is becoming very popular, and so a lot of people are being drawn to that K-pop kind of look.
Mhm.
But back 10, 20, 30 plus years ago, like we never had that. And so that's why I've had a lot of inquiries from a lot of Indian men in particular and some Asian men who have really felt like they've struggled in the Western dating life. And so that's why I always advocate, well, it's like you're trying to fight gravity. You can't really fight gravity. You can complain about it all you want, but but the fact that you can't dunk a basketball is not gravity's fault. Like, it is what it is. So all you can do is increase your skill set to be able to dunk that basketball. So it's the same thing coming with dating, with mental health, is that, we have no choice but to improve ourselves. And so, take the necessary steps to do that.
The other question is, what's interesting is that my question is, why is the Western ideal? Why is that considered the standard? Is that just because America is the greatest country, as people say, or is that what like is it, or is it dictated like fashion? They say they got the fall fashion and the spring fashion. Elucidate on that.
Yeah. So coming from India, right? There is a big movement in India towards Eurocentrism, like the white culture. Like, people want their skin to be lighter. That's considered more attractive than darker skin is. A lot of the Western trends are infiltrating over there too, like the fast food, like McDonald's and Burger King, Subways, from the music, hip hop, rap, right? And so we already kind of see that all this cultural media influence is going over to the rest of the world. And so similarly, right, like, it has been regarded as the dominant standard. I mean, I think it goes all the way back to the British colonizing all these different areas and asserting and taking over their influence. And it's not a blame or anything, it is what it is, but that's the reality of the situation, right? And there's no reason, what I tell people in class is that there's no reason to complain about it. All we can do is understand the world that we live in and adjust our actions accordingly to get the best results in life.
So it sounds like it's a game of poker. It's basically you take the cards you're dealt with and kind of basically you play your cards so that you can get the best outcome.
Yeah, you can't change the hand that you were dealt.
Yeah.
All you can do is change how you play it.
Yeah. And then so one thing you talk about is leveling up and changing. So, and again, also in Asian culture, I see a lot of and you probably see it as well. You probably treat a lot of guys. One thing is like basically in order to heal this wound of rejection and not fitting in, or not being bad and socially, is to make more money, or to chase status, like go to med school, or go to Wall Street and all this stuff. What is that?
Yep.
How do you address that?
So I think that's an evolutionary adaptation, right? As guys, we inherently understand that the higher status we have, the more likely our chances are to reproduce, right? Like, this is an evolutionarily designed mechanism, right? If you think back to hunter-gatherer days, like when we were evolving as a species, who is more useful to the tribe? Is it the hunter who's going out getting the food, collaborating with people? Is it the village chieftain? Or is it the male, the young-bodied male in the hunter-gatherer society who sits around at home and decides that he wants to smoke whatever grass they have at that time rather than go help the tribe? Who is a reproductive female more likely to mate with in that case, right? It's the successful hunter, the one who has more status, because that person has better genetics, most likely, right? They're ambitious, they're more physically fit, and those genetics will get passed down to their children, and then passed down to those children. Those children now have a higher chance of surviving with the hunter's genes rather than the bum's genes. So I think that evolutionary pressure, that selection pressure, has still carried on to this modern day. It just presents itself in a different way.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. And yeah, because how you address these problems, either you're running towards something because you love it, or you're trying to use it as a mask to cover up, your deep-seated insecurities or your fears. So that's quite
For
interesting.
sure.
Kind of
Yeah, just to kind of comment on that.
yeah, go ahead.
So this is actually a big problem in the bodybuilding world, where a lot of guys, right? There's obviously getting fit to get fit, right? Like that's one level. But then there's guys who really, really take it to the next high level and they become huge bodybuilders. That becomes their life and that becomes everything, that becomes their identity, right? But then a lot of those guys actually struggle with body dysmorphia. They have mental health uh, problems. They may not actually be even that romantically successful after they achieve this bodybuilding because obviously one, that's their whole identity, right? Like that's all that they care about. But two, they never really addressed a lot of the underlying mental health concerns that they had. And now that you have big muscles, sure, you might be covering it up, but it's they're still hanging out underneath, right? So while I think it is important as guys that you chase success, you chase money and those things, it shouldn't come at the expense of everything else in your life.
Yeah. Yeah, really fascinating topic. It's actually provoked a lot of thoughts and things to definitely think about. And so what's interesting is that you're kind of a coach slash psychiatrist, and how do you help men in this area like change or level up? What is it? Is it through just coaching? Is it through through medications? How do you help people level up? What's the next step?
Yeah, that's a good question, right? And so what I often tell clients is that imagine that you're stuck at a bottom of a well. Medication is kind of like a ladder, but you still have to climb it. So similarly, if I'm assessing a client, right, comes to me with young 22-year-old male comes to me, says he's lonely, he's miserable, doesn't feel like he has any friends, hasn't dated anyone, has never kissed anybody, is still a virgin, has probably maybe thought about self-harm, is drifting away in college, failing classes, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the first thing is to assess if there's any underlying psychiatric problems, major depressive disorder, generalized anxiety disorder, bipolar disorder, and maybe some childhood trauma, right? And trying to address those because that's the foundation. And
Yeah.
so we might start a medication to help with that.
Hmm.
But that's just the first step. Then the next step is okay, now addressing where do we want to go from here? Coming up with a plan. Any kind of coaching we do, there has to be some sort of direction. So helping the client decide, okay, where is it that you want to take your life? And so once we define a plan, we have a destination, we have a starting point. And so now we can start to devise the roadmap in order to get there. And so whether that's doing therapy or mental health coaching to help them with distorted thought patterns, whether that's helping them get in the gym or get physically active, whether that's working actively on social skills development, because that is a skill. It's not just like either you have it or you don't. Then we decide the roadmap in order to get the client to their goals.
Yeah. Yeah. Really going back to kind of this racial culture divide, do you see more Asian men come to you for these problems, or is it not prejudicial against race? Is it across all races?
So that's a very good question. So I actually tend to see more Caucasian men than anything.
Hmm. Well, I wonder why. That's interesting.
So I believe the reason why is because in our cultures, there's a lot more stigma against any kind of mental health treatment, right?
Hmm.
I remember one time a mom called me and she said that an Indian mom called me, like a family friend kind of connection. And so she told me that my son, I think he might fail out of high school. He isn't doing very well. He's kind of getting more lonely. Uh, he's lashing out a lot. He's getting agitated, things like that, right?
Oh.
And so, we talked through some things we could have done. We maybe have discussed, okay, like what next steps would be. And then the next thing she goes is, but I don't want him getting any mental health treatment. My son, my beta, is not uh, mentally sick. He doesn't need a mental health or like a like a crazy doctor. So I think that's a huge thing that prevents a lot of families from, and I think teens or young adults themselves from seeking out that level of care.
Interesting. How can people contact you, follow you, check out your work? I know you got a really nice Instagram profile. I encourage everybody to check it out and give you a follow and reach out to you.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, Chris. So, yeah, the best way to get in contact is to go to my website, www.agamdawanmd.com, AGAMDHAWANMD.com, and to schedule a free consult where we'll go through your concerns, exactly what you're going through, and then decide, okay, like, what can we do to help, and hopefully come up with a plan to work together.
Yeah. And for all the audience out there, let's thank Dr. Agam Dhawan for coming on. He's got professional as well as personal experience and expertise, and really definitely give his work a follow and reach out to him. And with that, thanks so much for coming on.
Perfect. Thank you for having me.